Weekly Shonen Jump is a magazine that, obviously, has been around for a long time. Originally starting in 1968, Jump has been a major staple of both Japanese culture and the world's at large. The stories told in its over close to 100 years of publication spreading to countries across the globe. Characters like Goku, Luffy, Naruto, and Ichigo, series like JoJo, Slam Dunk, Yu-Gi-Oh!, shit that has formed and shaped the childhoods of millions, all comes from this one long-running magazine. There's dozens of deep dives into Jump as a brand, both as the company itself and the series they've run, but one thing that has always interested me as I've dove deeper into the backwoods of manga magazines is the legit insane amounts of manga that, for one reason or another, have kinda just been forgot about. The bottomless trench of manga that, quality aside, never even got the chance to spread their wings due to them being totally overshadowed by the smash hits at the top. But between those stars that shine in Jump's sky and the ones buried down below, in the middle exists an almost endless sea of series that, while doing fine sale-wise, getting a solid amount of volumes released and even possibly an anime, have just kind of been left behind in the minds of Jump fans. Series like Muhyo and Roji, Hoshin Ingi, Black Cat, ones that by all means aren't bad at all and they have dedicated fans out there, but overall have faded from most people's thoughts, and in my opinion, that is where you can find some of the most interesting and underrated series in Weekly Jump. The things that for one reason or another didn't strike a match with the world at large, but for those exact same reasons can hit you individually like a truck. And today, I want to talk about one of those exact manga. A series that, despite having solid sales, a good online reputation, and a pretty decent anime, it's kind of never really talked about in the grand scale of Jump itself. And while I can understand why, because it's not a perfect series, I do think that Beelzebub by Ryuhei Tamura is, if anything, one of the most underrated Jump manga I've read in the last few years. A series that combines shonen power battles, gag comedy, and delinquent beatdowns in a way that's unlike anything else I've read in Jump. And today, I want to talk about it. So first, let's look at both Tamura and the series itself. But before that, be sure to hit that like button and drop a comment so the algorithm maybe picks this one up. Because like I said, most people have just forgotten about Beels, and I could see no one even finding this video because of that. Also, Baby Beal is literally butt-ass naked through the whole series, and I gotta work around that, so throw me a bone, eh? Now let's get in there. Beelzebub ran in Jump from February of 2009 to March of 2015, it getting 27 total volumes before ending and being transferred to Jump Next, running there for another year with the subtitle Extra Edition, the 28th and final volume actually just being post-stories and side chapters. The whole series written and drawn by, like I had said, Ryuhei Tamura, a relative newcomer in the manga field. Growing up, Tamura's mother was a big fan of manga herself, transferring that love into her son and giving him the idea to draw manga as a career at the age of 16. But despite only having a few one-shots published, Beelzebub itself actually being one of them, Tamura had no experience in manga outside of working as an assistant for Toshiaki Iwashiro, the creator of Siren. So, Beels was his first actual real series as a mangaka, and overall, it was successful. As of 2024, Beelzebub has had 2 light novels, an anime adaptation, and over 3 million volumes sold worldwide. It usually ranking pretty high in the Shonen Jump weekly table of contents for a large chunk of the series' run. But even with all of these positives, the series sits in a place of memory that most people have just forgot about. its online conversation usually just being, "Oh yeah, that. It was a good series. Shame it got cancelled and had a really rushed ending." A statement that's partially untrue, as we'll talk about later. So, with Beelzebub sitting in both a place of high praise and total absence in Jump's history, what is it about? Does it live up to this solid reputation? Or is it something that was always destined to be forgot about? Well, first, let's take a look at the opening few chapters and lay the groundwork out for what the wild ride of Beelzebub even is. The story of Olga and Baby Beal being stupid, sweet, and extremely badass. Oh, and I also want to mention, it never got any kind of official English release, meaning that, of course, scans are the only way to read it here in America. So some of the panels in this video and whole chapters, if you should read the series, look kind of rough or have translations that can be mixed. So just a fair warning. They do totally get better and stay that way around volume 11, with the first 10 ranging from fine to eh, so just push through. That aside, shout out to the multiple groups that worked on this series through the years to even make it accessible in the first place. You're doing God's work. Actually, reading scans is honestly pretty bad because shut up bitch, I bought the volume so I can do whatever I want. Scan haters can eat my whole ass. Anyway, Ishiyama High School, home of the badasses, the mecca of delinquents and shitheads. A place where strength rules the school and the weak fall in line. You got multiple gangs, crazy teachers, the whole 9 yards. And standing at the top of the school, the one badass to rule them all, is Tatsumi Oga, the devilish delinquent who beats the hell out of anyone that annoys him, standing over Ishiyama as its strongest fighter. And one day, down by the riverside as Oga is beating the shit out of a few dudes, a man with an arrow in his chest wearing only his boxers comes floating by them in the river. And as Oga confusedly watches the dude, he suddenly splits in half, opens up, and spits a little naked baby out with green hair and a golden pacifier. Oga, understandably confused as hell, tries to ask the baby a few questions, although due to Oga's, winning personality, he can't help but be a shithead delinquent to even a random baby. But, to Oga's confusion, despite how mean and evil he makes himself look, the little baby just smiles bigger and for some reason gets attached to Oga, clinging on and leaving him stuck with this random baby who appeared from a dude's chest. As Oga is trying to figure out what the hell he should even do, the demon wet nurse Hilda busts into his house and claims that this baby is the son of the demon lord himself, named Beelzebub III, his dad sending the baby to the human world with the goal of him growing up and destroying humanity. And since Oga is such a naturally evil dipshit, Beel has chosen him to be the dad that will raise the demon prince into Earth's destruction. Oga now stuck with this baby and an intense demon maid who forcefully moves into his house and convinces Oga's family that Beel is their love child. And Oga, being a delinquent shitlord who now has this whole ass demon family living with him, tries to dump baby Beel and say fuck all that. But since Beels has developed an attachment to Oga, if he should walk 50 feet away from the kid, he begins to cry and discharges an immense electrical shock, frying up everything around him. Oga now having to live his daily life with baby Beel riding on his back to keep him close, while also keeping him happy so he doesn't cry tears of lightning. An over-the-top violent wet nurse always standing over his shoulder if he doesn't live up to his fatherly duties. All of these things, of course, make a shithead like Oga pissed and he wants out. Him spending the early chapters of the series hunting down a potential badass replacement parent for baby Beel. Tamura using this plot to introduce the side characters of the story as well as possible people for Oga to pawn Beel off on. Fellow badasses like the gang leader Kanzaki, the billionaire Himikawa, the strong and stoic Kuneida, and the heavy hitter dummy Tojo. with Oga and Beal growing together as they meet and inevitably face down these delinquent leaders of Ishiyama High, other rival schools, and demons from the underworld. The story from here going back and forth between 3 separate sets of structure types, that being of a shonen battle manga, a delinquent manga, and a straight up slice of life gag manga. And it's for that exact reason that I think Beelzebub is both looked back on super fondly by people like me, as well as written off to memory by others. But before I talk about that Triforce aspect to the plot and get a bit spoilery, I want to talk first about the art of Beelzebub that Tamura grows through the series. How it blends both comedy and raw delinquent shit together to make a style totally unique all to itself. So, like I had said before, Beelzebub was Tamura's first fully published series, and when you look at the early volumes, I think it's kind of obvious. Now, there's nothing in these chapters that looks bad really. In fact, overall, it's totally solid for a rookie series in Jump. But if I had to use a word to describe the early designs and minute-to-minute paneling, it would be functional. A style that looks fine, but not much more. The thing is, despite the general flow looking kind of basic at first, in almost each chapter, there would be a moment where Tamura drops either a full single or double page spread. And even as early as chapter 1 and going from there, this is where you can tell there's talent that's still working itself out. These spreads are flexing Tamura's subtly strong character art, his smart and creative use of shading on the cast, knowing when to totally remove a background so the focus comes in on the character and their words or actions, but most importantly, making the people on page seem like a total imposing badass who you wouldn't want to fuck with. Covering them in heavy, scratchy lines and big shit-eating grins with eyes that can pierce souls. And as the series continues on over the 28 volumes, Tamura is able to take those skills in his spreads and work them back into the moment-to-moment art. The later volumes showing off how he can make Oga look so badass and intimidating with nothing but simple shots of his face and a little baby Beal on his shoulder. One of my favorite aspects to any manga are chapter cover pages, since they have a chance to let the artist flex and draw just whatever the hell they want. And Tamura fills Beelzebub with tons of shots that have Oga and Beal just being an adorable father and son. Shots of the delinquent cast in hard-ass poses. He covers the whole spectrum. And outside of it showing how much Tamura obviously likes drawing his entire cast, it really hammers home the dynamic Oga, Beal, and Hilda all have together. This dipshit found family who would take down demon armies for each other, and it's really sweet. A lot of my videos have me praising series with art that stands out and is remembered for their own unique reasons, things like Dorohedoro or Hellsing. And while I personally wouldn't say that Tamura's art is on that same level of total individual style, his solid foundation and overall progression is so strong and impactful in a way that I enjoy just as much as those other series. Like sure, there's aspects here that could be considered standard, but because Tamura can translate his characters in such a raw and enjoyable way that only grows the more as you read, I think he's able to stand on his own in the manga field as a noteworthy artist. And past that on another level, the level of a Shonen Jump battler slash delinquent brawler manga, this is where Tamura's art excels. Him drawing raw-ass combat scenes that are super fluid and extremely brutal from the first chapters, and only growing stronger with it as the enemies Oga and crew deal with just get more demonic in nature. With this being a delinquent series, most of the characters straight up fight with their hands, the combat scenes being filled with a mix of demon power explosions and dudes just straight boxing the shit out of each other. Tamura able to let you follow punch to punch with realistic flow and heavy impact. but then having Oga use a Zebel Blast to kablam his enemies through a building. So with that said, people obviously do use shonen power attacks in battles, as well as a small handful using weapons. The demon aspect of the series largely coming into play with the battles of the plot. Now, just for a basic rundown, humans can form contracts with demons to channel their power through them. Oga using Baby Beel's Demon Prince energy in combat to blast away their problems using the Zebel Blast. Oga forming a seal in the air that represents King Beelzebub and punching it. The force from that punch multiplying with Beel's energy in the seal and creating explosions that can destroy entire schools. A thing Oga does multiple times, with that same sign of the contract being tattooed on the user's body and growing both with each use, and just in general as both demon and contractor bond together. Meaning that if Oga goes too hard using Beel's power, he could possibly become a demon himself. So with that framework, Oga and the cast brawl with delinquents, demons, and freaks in general through a large part of the series. The battles growing in both overall scale and in the skill that Tamura can use to lead you from hit to hit. But with all of this said about the art and the combat, there's another very large aspect to Beelzebub. One I mentioned earlier, and I think that, depending on who you are, can possibly make or break the series for you. And that would be the large focus on slice of life arcs and gag comedy. The series constantly flip-flopping back and forth between all-out brawls between badasses, and things like a volleyball game that determines if the main cast gets expelled or not. And eventually later down the road, it just becoming a full-on shonen battle manga. So from here, I want to talk about the series in a way that spoils bits of the plot and certain character stories, but just fairly basic stuff before I talk about the ending arcs with more spoilers. I do still plan to talk about the anime and Tamura's recent projects after all this plot stuff, so you can skip here if you want to avoid that, and if not, I'll warn you again before major spoilers. Sound good? Alright, let's go. Like I've said earlier, Beelzebub is a series that has three major aspects to it. One being the delinquent gangs, the school Oga attends being the center of all badassness in Japan, as well as most of the side characters being gang leaders or just outright local street legends. Mixing in with these delinquents is, of course, the shonen power battles. Oga leveling up to beat the asses of his rivals, them human, demon, or otherwise. And right in the middle of these two pillars of the story is the slice of life. A lot of arcs focusing on goofy bullshit with the cast, them being forced into do-or-die volleyball matches, couples Christmas tournaments, and a high-tech online round of Battlefield 2149 against a team of demons. And besides just those arcs, the series itself is silly as hell. People like Oga, Furuichi, and Tojo just being walking, talking gag stereotypes that fill both the slower moments and the bloody battles with dumbass jokes, over-the-top reaction faces, and wacky plot points in general. At one point, due to a big fight, Ishiyama High is destroyed and the cast is sent to Saint Ishiyama, the higher class prep school for richy bitches who don't appreciate their ritzy academy, having to take in these street gang thugs, with their elite student council challenging our delinquent main cast to a battle. Except, it's not a fight, but the earlier mentioned volleyball tournament. Both the main cast and the rival council treating this over-the-top shonen-powered match with actual seriousness, spending multiple chapters in the game before any more actual delinquent shonen battle shit happens, with these types of things flopping back and forth through the whole series between real-ass battles and goofy-ass events that the cast kinda just falls into. And all things considered, it's a really smart way to keep a shonen battle manga pretty fresh. A lot of series that end up just being battle after battle can get stale pretty fast, especially in a framework as simple as Beelzebub's. But with these breaks into the plot based on goofiness that involves actual enemies and their shonen bullshit, it can help breathe fresh air into certain parts of the series. And while this sometimes works out great, like in the Saint Ishiyama arc, I also think it can work in the exact reverse. The gag arcs taking away from what can be some legitimate fantastic plot and phenomenal action. One of the most famous arcs of the series, well, famous relative to this series' popularity, is the Pillar Division battle, where the older brother of Beal, In, shows up and, due to some goof-ass misunderstandings, ends up challenging Furuichi and by extension Oga to a war. Him having control of the Behemoth 34 Pillars, a demon army made up of 394 members, with 10 demon barons who are named after famous dragons, like Salamander and Naga, with 24 generals below them who are named after the letters of the alphabet of angels, with their numbers matching their positions on the list. And at the top of them, In's army is being led by a total badass demon named Jabberwock, who reminds me of someone like Zanzis from Hitman Reborn. So with this large list of enemies and an already huge cast of side characters between Ishiyama and Saint Ishi, there's a chance for some interesting conflicts between these demon generals and the characters like Kanzaki and Himekawa. Except, that's not what happens at all. And instead, Oga rushes their base by himself to beat the shit out of everyone like Luffy did in the intro to Enies Lobby, while the remainder of that large-ass cast sits in a room battling In himself over rounds of Battlefield. And like, I'm not kidding when I say that, it's legit basically just Battlefield 2142. The story spending multiple pages of multiple chapters focusing on this comedy match, while Oga on the other end is getting dope-ass pages back to back of him blowing down the Pillar Squad. And while I am enjoying that action, it's with arcs like this where I feel for a lot of readers, your mileage on Beelzebub may begin to vary. When it comes to series that want to walk the line between shonen battles and gag comedy, it's a hard balance to make. Some manga excel at it, like Gintama, a masterclass mix of emotional shonen rawness and absolute dumbass humor. And some series attempt it but fall out of one aspect to focus on the other, like with Hitman Reborn having 7-ish volumes of gag chapters before it just becomes a straight-up shonen battle series. And with Beelzebub, I feel like it falls somewhere in the middle, for both better and worse. Going back to the Pillar arc, introducing In and his huge army, using these smaller battles of Oga and crew with a few of the demons like Hecados, setting both sides up for the eventual war. Oga having to train himself so he can take down Jabberwock after Dude's Dragon ate Hilda and created a solid rivalry for both Oga and the crew. But in what is a consistent issue with Beelzebub, that side crew is regulated to an honestly kind of boring online FPS match, while Oga and Tojo, thankfully, get to actually fight. And only them, against this huge army of characters who at first seemed like at least some of them could be somewhat important, but instead, all of them are just jobbers for Oga to slap around, creating this odd feeling for me seeing some extremely dope action and character moments from Oga and Beal, but then swapping over to a kind of boring VR gag match that features literally a bunch of characters who I'd rather have at the Pillar Brawl, maybe giving both them and some of those demons any meaningful screen time. And this is a personal complaint I have about, well, a lot of the arcs. Beelzebub, like I've said, has a large focus on both comedy and combat, both delinquents and dumb shit. And where Tamura can excel at both things, I think when he tries to constantly mix them together, it ends up creating long-standing issues with the series itself. The entire early story is focused on introducing these delinquent badasses for Oga to fight and eventually become reluctant friends with, namely Kanzaki, Kunita, Himekawa, and Tojo, establishing them as the main side characters for the series. The thing is, it feels like the story almost always chooses to focus on Oga doing the plot important things, while these characters are shuffled off somewhere else, sent off on gag goose chases in the background while Oga and Hilda are the only two real players in the story. Now, this isn't to say these characters don't have their own strong moments and even small arcs. In fact, it's the opposite. Kuniita, the leader of the all-woman gang called the Red Tails, is a powerful as hell swordsman who can channel demon energy in a way like Oga, her having a crush on his dumbass that he's too oblivious to notice. Himekawa is the laid-back rich kid who, instead of getting his hands dirty, would prefer to pay underlings to do the job for him, tossing money out casually to do literally whatever he wants and leading his gang with dollar signs. Tojo, the secret beast of Ishiyama, is the only character from start to finish that feels like he can stand on an equal level with Oga, the two taking on both enemies together and each other multiple times in the series, and almost always standing shoulder to shoulder. And also, he's just an absolute total dumbass, but in an endearing way. Kanzaki unfortunately has the least to his character. He's literally just a delinquent gang leader badass that's also the son of a Yakuza family, but his design is really good and he gets some strong moments later on, so I still like him. These four make up the main side cast, along of course with Furuichi, Oga's best friend from his younger days who, despite being weak, perverted, annoying, self-centered, and well, at any rate, he's the overall comic relief to the series. They're basically to be a Shinpachi type character that yells about the dumbass bits while getting abused by pretty much everyone else. With these 5 characters, and also a whole army of smaller side casts like Natsume, the long hair flippant badass who should be more important but isn't. I really wish we knew how strong he actually was. The MK5's useless asses. The Red Tails army of bad bitches who used to be led by Oga's sister until her graduation. And the multiple enemy teams who are defeated and become friends like usual in shonen. It's safe to say that Beelzebub has a large and interesting side cast, full of characters who have potential to get tons of cool shit. The issue is, overall, these people are almost always regulated to the side stories and arcs, some of them barely even existing outside of name and design. And when you go back and look at the Battlefield match I mentioned that kept the rest of the cast away from the pillar battle, and the actual pillars themselves being dealt with and moved on from almost right away after their introductions, it really takes what could have been a fantastic arc overall and weighs it down for me. Sure, not all of the pillars had to matter, I'm definitely not saying that. But it sucks ones like Hekados, Lamia, and Agil, who kinda seemed like they could get more writing or meaningful appearances, instead got nothing, were punched down right away, and then turned into gag characters immediately afterward. And in that statement is the core of this issue with me, meaning that the gags of Beelzebub, the overall comedy, sometimes takes more importance than the other aspects, the delinquent and shonen battle angles, in moments where I feel like the alternative would have been better. Comedy is obviously subjective, and I don't think anyone is like wrong or some shit because they may enjoy the gag or slice of life aspects in Beelzebub more than the other two sides. That's totally fine and understandable even. But for me and my enjoyment, I think Tamura excels way more at his badass delinquent writing and insanely cool combat than he does with the comedy aspects. Him choosing over and over to focus in on that comedy for almost the entire side cast, while Oga is the only one to get the real play in major arcs. When I was reading chapter to chapter earlier this year, it was a constant back and forth between some of the dopest shonen shit I'd read since Air Gear last year, and some comedy subplots in the middle of those arcs that fell totally flat. The comedic stories sometimes being the actual focus with things like the couple's Christmas festival, an over-the-top gag showdown between couples in the school, it being sandwiched between two really good arcs with amazing battles and big moments for Oga and Beale. So bro, it just kinda had me glazing over while I blasted through the dialogue, I can't even lie. That part of the series just isn't really for me. But, like I had said earlier, this doesn't mean these characters are always forced into side arcs, and they actually do get some fantastic stuff. Things like Furuichi getting the nose tissues that let him form contracts with the 34 Pillars, becoming the most badass dude in Ishiyama and beating down everyone from Kanzaki to Tojo, with Oga having to step up and put him back in his place while revealing their backstory connections. Furuichi becoming friends with punk shit kid Oga and wanting to stand by his side as Oga would run headfirst into battles. And it's a great way to both let Furuichi get some dope moments that he has not had at all in this series, and reveal his childhood to teenage long friendship with Oga. There's the San Mark's Academy arc where the King Demon Lord asks Oga and Beale to recover a stolen painting, it being hidden away in a high-class art school. Them bringing Himekawa's rich ass since not only can he pay their way in, he has his own connections to the school and its characters, revealing some of his goofy ass backstory while Oga and Beale make significant progression in the storyline, introducing things like the painting of Beale's mom and the Solomon Company. Another example of comedy dumb shit mixing with actual developing plot and raw moments, them involving both Oga and some side characters to make for an overall great arc. This right here is why my complaints about the fully gag moments and the misuse of side characters is so loud. Because when the opposite happens and it's a perfect mix of all three elements that involves additional members of the cast in meaningful ways, it feels like a legitimate 9 out of 10 series that can stand alongside the kings of its genre, up there with things like Gintama. Thankfully though, despite my issues with some of the arcs and the structure of the series, it's towards the ending where I legit think Beelzebub hits its true potential and brings both the climax and finale to an almost perfect end for both Oga and Beale, as well as most of the side cast at large. And this is where I'm going to be getting into big spoilers so I can talk about how Beals brings it all home, so skip here if you want to move on ahead. Through the entire story of Beelzebub, whether it's in the background or the main focus, the world of demons and their connections to both Oga and Beale have been growing slowly over the plot, both with the types of contractors and spell users they meet, and with the growth of their own demon powers as they bond and beat ass together. Now, with Oga and crew finally back at Ishiyama after it had been destroyed like multiple times from big power battles, rising star freshmen from other schools have appeared to challenge the badasses of Ishiyama, all of them seemingly users of demonic power that beat the shit out of almost the whole main cast, forcing everyone to lock in and get stronger so they can take down these rival demon delinquents. The group being led by the pretty boy freak Takamiya, a demon contractor with control over Lucifer, the series revealing that there are 7 deadly sin demons who exist in the world, and after a unification war some years ago, are all under the rule of King Beelzebub III, Baby Beale's dad, with some unknown company having recently taken control of the remaining 6 sins to use for their own needs, Lucifer included. It now being bonded with this delinquent wild boy who, due to their combined strength, is able to be the first real person in the series to keep up with Oga and beat his ass, while in the background of their fight, Himekawa has betrayed Ishiyama and teamed up with Takamiya and the mysterious company backing him, the Solomon Group I mentioned earlier. leaving the main cast broken, beaten, and on the defense against this wave of killers who can all use big shonen powers. And in my opinion, this is what Beelzebub should have always been like right here. This is the peak shit. With the Ishiyama invasion, the cast is all finally made to have their own important roles to fill in an arc that affects the main plot. Kanzaki, Furuichi, Kuniida, and Tojo all having their own battles to fight, while Himikawa raises an army of pomp-wearing troops plotting with the villains in the shadows. And it made me so happy getting to these chapters because, like I've said, I really like all these dipshits. And I just want them to get that same level of importance any major side cast usually gets in a shonen battler. This doubling down when Furuichi is killed, technically. His heart and soul split apart and given to some of the delinquent invaders, leaving Oga and crew to track down and beat the stolen souls out of them. And as their soul hunt begins and the fights pop off, the Beelzebub crest appears on the bodies of Oga and Beel's most loyal warriors, feeling like the story itself is finally acknowledging them as being worthy to fight in the real battles of the series. This tattoo powering up each of its owners with Baby Beel's demon power so they can whip the shit out of the invading delinquents. Oga himself taking on Takamiya at the roof of Ishiyama, and man, if the whole series had this level of cohesion between all of its moving parts, Beelzebub would be remembered as one of the best shonen out there because honestly, I think this arc is legitimately, no shit, a shonen arc that stands up there with Soul Society, with the Sasuke retrieval arc. Whatever big shonen arc you can think of, Beelzebub deserves its props here for masterfully mixing everything together and creating a large-scale but believably threatening battle for the cast, letting each of them shine in their own ways. And even more to add on at the finale, Tamura cashes in on the series-long relationship between Oga and Beel, as human and demon, as father and son, taking these two and raising them to whole new heights in these final volumes. So, from the start of the series until the finish line, the story has, at its core, been about Oga raising Baby Beel into being a man. One that won't cry when he's upset, one that can stand up to his enemies and protect his underlings, or friends as we would call them. And while over these 200 chapters, I will say at times it felt like Tamura himself forgot about this and just focused more on the gag arcs, the relationship between these two is usually always at the core of the manga. The duo almost never being separated and taking on all fights together. And watching them both grow and deepen their bond over the story is easily one of the best parts of Beelzebub. Baby Beel is just the absolute best, dude. He's so goddamn cute, and easily one of the funniest characters in the whole manga. And seeing Oga, the over-the-top dipshit delinquent king, having to raise this baby who should be terrified of him, but loves him instead, and it's just so good. And now here in the final arc, this build-up peaks with the activation of an anti-demon box, it cancelling out Oga's powers and separating him from Beel, removing his ability to even see the little dude, his shonen power-ups wiped away and Takamiya beating his shit in, leaving Baby Beel as the one who has to scoot his ass across the school to help the rest of the cast in their fights, pumping his demon power into them so they can all work together to then save Oga, destroy the box, and bring the father-son combo back together. Beel honestly being the real-ass hero of the arc and saving the whole damn day on his own. The little princess growing up, him regrouping with Oga, and them going basically Super Saiyan and beating the shit out of Takamiya together, ending what is easily the best arc in the series. But the story isn't over, and while the next and final arc is fast-paced, ending almost as quick as it begins, it still manages to take that relationship between Oga and Beel to even new levels. series. The duo traveling to the USA and tracking down the HQ for Solomon Company, learning that not only are they being led by Beale's mom, who, after she got into an argument with the Demon Lord, just left the underworld to go stay at her mom's, the company has also been guiding Oga down a predetermined path when they laid out to help him foster the bond with baby Beale, them having a grand plan to honestly do some shit about making the demons and humans fight, but whatever, it literally does not matter at this stage. But what does is that at this point, Oga sends Beale back to live with his mom. I mean, to be fair, he was only supposed to be watching over him temporarily until he found somewhere to dump him off. And now finding his mom, who had also been looking for Beale, it's basically the perfect solution. Except it's been too long. They've been through too much together. Their ups and downs, the bathroom accidents, electric shocks, and big demon battles. And now, all of this time later, little baby Beale doesn't want to leave Oga, saying his first words of the series other than Babu, him reaching out for Oga, his dada, as he walked away. Oga reminding him the lesson he's taught over the whole manga. Men don't cry. The tears in Oga's eyes close to running down his own face. Man, no lies to tell, I was on a beach hotel balcony in Florida, breeze blowing and Drake beside me while I read this chapter, and I fucking turned into the why am I crying in the club dude, because holy shit, these pages knock the breath out of me. And honestly, cemented Beelzebub as forever being one of my favorite shonen manga. The relationship between these two is just too strong, too sweet. And any issues I have with the series aside, it's all worth it to see these two become the absolute best father and son duo. Of course, the story doesn't just end there. Oga, now separated from baby Beale, goes back home and learns that the whole town has gone quiet. The people of Ishiyama all turned into stone, with the actual final boss just appearing in Oga's house. A dude named Fuji, a spellmaster who has a demon contract with Satan himself, one of the 7 deadly sins, starting the actual final arc of the series. When I was preparing to read Beelzebub, I saw online it was pretty unanimous that, quote, the series got cancelled and the ending was rushed, meaning the final arc was not good, unquote. Now, I've seen enough shit and read things likewise to know that trusting online masses about bad endings is overall a mistake. And while I myself have even done that exact thing on my channel, I still prefer to see a full series and evaluate it as a whole for myself these days. And Beelzebub is a perfect example as to why, because this ending is fine. Now, I'm not gonna just overly spoil and analyze the last arc because honestly, due to how quickly it wraps up, there's no real reason to. And despite it bringing in Satan himself with the concept of the 7 deadly sins, Tamura must not have felt like dealing with all of that and instead just ends the series in a big fight where, of course, Oga is reunited with baby Beale. Them literally, like actually going Super Saiyan this time and winning the big fight. The cast finishing up the story on graduation day where the torch is passed down to the next gang leaders of Ishiyama. And in my opinion, this ending is really solid. Sure, it's a little tropey, the 7 sins got no play at all and the Satan-Fuji duo is swatted down almost instantly, but like, that fits in with the exact vibe Beelzebub has had the entire time. It's abrupt, it's silly, it doesn't care to end arcs with big gags and Oga one-shotting enemies. And while that might not always hit for me, it sure shot me in the chest here at the end, forever locking the series in as a 9 out of 10 in my eyes. So, all of that rambling, complaining, and praising aside, is Beelzebub perfect? Is it something that should stand next to series like One Piece or Dragon Ball? I mean, nah, not really, but is that such a bad thing? The manga from start to end has random issues that can really build up. It has arcs that I consider boring. It has a bit too large of a cast that it sometimes does absolutely nothing with. Shout out that one dude from the beach trip arc and the character Akahoshi, someone who was pointed out more than once back to back that he looks and acts like Oga, but never ever comes up again. The demon aspect itself sometimes feels largely underplayed. Characters like Arthrun appearing and doing shit to imply future events, and never coming back, this does not count. The Pillar Squad in The Seven Deadly Sins, they all deserve way more than they get. But standing next to all of those issues is Oga and Baby Beal, two characters that I have an almost endless love for. Two dudes who exist to be total badasses while also being hilariously sweet. Them getting in fights that are, no exaggeration, some of my favorite in all of Jump. A manga doesn't have to be perfect to be great. It doesn't have to rival the big three to be worthy of talking about. It just needs to whip ass at what it's trying to do. And for people like me, hey, that's more than enough, man. So going back to the posts and articles about the manga being cancelled, there's literally negative proof of that. And in fact, towards the end of the series, it was still getting center color pages and magazine covers. It got a whole epilogue volume in Jump Next that I personally didn't care much for, so if you want to say the series ends at volume 27, I'd probably agree. But when I read the online conversation, it seems like people either A, wanted more from the Seven Deadly Sins and Satan in that final arc, which fair, I guess, that makes total sense. Or B, they read volume 28 and considered it the main ending and not the graduation from 27, with it kinda just feeling like a book of duds compared to the last two blowout adventures. So while I do understand these complaints and how some people could walk away feeling a bit disappointed, regardless of what you think of the ending itself, to say it was cancelled is kinda silly. Rushed, sure, but I doubt cancelled. Just wanted to throw this in there because you see people online going, yeah, the series was cancelled, it's a shame. And then when people ask them, oh, it was cancelled, where's the proof of that? They literally go, oh, there's no proof, it's just a rumor that's widely accepted. Yeah, maybe don't fucking do that, that's lame and sucks actually, what the fuck? Alright, with all of that out of the way, the final things left I want to talk about are both the anime and what Tamura's been doing these last few years. And on that first one, the Beelzebub anime is fine. Done by Pierrot Plus, a subsidiary company owned by Studio Pierrot, the anime ran from January of 2011 to March of the next year, getting 60 total episodes. This is actually how I first learned about the series back in like 2014 probably? I've mentioned it in other videos, but that was around the time I got Crunchyroll and fell into watching series like Toriko, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, and as I browsed the seemingly endless sea of random shonen anime, I saw the box art for Beelzebub, and like, I could just tell from this big logo in the background that it was a shonen series, you know what I mean? It has Bleach / Naruto / D-Gray-Man logo vibes if you get where I'm coming from. And at that time, my goal was literally to watch a shitload of shonen and evaluate them. Mainly just to distract myself from working an awful job and wanting to die every day. So in an effort to avoid all of that, I eventually popped on the first episode and was greeted by the absolute banger opening theme, Da 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 by Group Tamashi. It being so colorful and silly, but also showing off what was obviously badass shonen characters, and I was immediately down with it. I kept up with it for about 20 episodes, but for one reason or another, probably the ones I've talked about in this video, I fell off of watching it and moved on to something else, remembering years later that I enjoyed the series overall, but had no strong attachment to it. It wasn't until I read it this year that I fell in real love with it. And now going back and looking at the anime after reading the manga, I think it both falls short in some ways, but still manages to be a solid watch regardless. Animation wise, it ranges from not that bad to eh. Some fights showing off Oga's hand-to-hand combat with flashy attacks, and some being more of a slideshow than a real brawl. But where this is also a gag series and those scenes are more suited to different styles of animation than a shonen fight, it all ends up working out just fine, and it elevates the comedy higher in some cases over the manga due to the simple addition of voice acting. It's not perfect by any means, but for what Beelzebub is, I think it's really solid, and if you're a fan of the series, absolutely worth checking some parts of. Unfortunately, with only 60 episodes, the series barely gets to the end content before getting a filler final arc and wrapping up. The best stuff in the series is still unanimated and likely never to be. Of course, like with most things, you see rumors it was cancelled because manga sales were declining. But like I had said earlier, there's no proof of either of these things, and it more than likely just had really low DVD sales. Sucks, but is what it is, I guess. With that all said, the only thing left is what Tamura has been doing since the ending of Beelzebub, and unfortunately, it's been a little bit of a tough ride. After Beelz ended in 2014, with the side chapters ending a year later, it would be a full 2 more years before his next series began in Jump, titled Hungry Marie, a rom-com about a Buddhist-raised kid who falls in love with his Catholic neighbor, only to find out that her family has plans to resurrect the last queen of the French royal family, Marie-Therese Charlotte. Yeah. Unfortunately, it sold pretty poorly and was cancelled within 4 volumes. A few years later in 2020, he began another series called Hard-Boiled Cop and Dolphin, following a hard-boiled cop, imagine that, who moves to a new seaside town and gets partnered up with a walking, talking cop dolphin, them investigating the disappearance of a cult that worshipped a little girl who was supposedly the daughter of a dolphin. Yeah. And just like with Hungry Marie, sales didn't hit for the series, and it only lasted 5 volumes before getting the axe. And it's a shame that Jump wasn't satisfied with them. Something Tamura agreed with, I guess. Him bailing from Jump for his next series, Cosmos. It currently running in monthly Sunday GX, the same magazine with things like Black Lagoon and Zom 100. This story following an intergalactic insurance agent girl who deals with aliens and their money, a human boy teaming up and going along with her into space. Yeah, and from what I can tell, this one is doing well. It's been recommended by other big artists like fucking Tite Kubo. I could honestly see it coming to the US eventually, hopefully, maybe. And I absolutely plan to check it out when it ends. Really glad Tamura finally found his flow again, in a place that probably lets him stretch his wings much more than where he was before. Thanks for watching, shout out to the patrons, and I hope this video didn't come off as like overly negative at points. Regardless of anything I've said otherwise, Beelzebub is a hard 9 out of 10. And I recommend it to everyone. It ain't perfect, but who gives a shit when it's this fun, badass, and sweet? See you next time with whatever's next. I got like 4 videos cooking at once, so I just need to pick one and do that. Later.